Good morning, good afternoon, good night, depending the place you are hearing me. I want to talk today about mathematics and Marxism, in particular Marxist economics, because I've heard that somebody don't like the mathematics because he thinks it's impossible to understand the exploitation within the system, within the capitalist system, using mathematics. But behind this sentence, there is a great misunderstanding of the mathematics and the dialectical materialism, because we as Marxists, as dialectic materialists, we accept that the scientific method, it's abstraction, and the real things, the concrete, the abstraction and the concrete. No? We're going to the abstraction, going from the concrete, we go to the abstraction, and we return to the concrete. We go again to the abstraction and return again to the concrete with answers, questions, answer question. The mathematics we accept is an abstraction of the concrete. This is the real scientific method. Somebody within the science doesn't accept the scientific method because they are not as they don't accept the empirism, the method of the empirism, the observation, hypothesis, etc., so on, that we learned in the high school, because that's bad. But we, as Marxists, we accept the method, the scientific method, but as we are saying, actually, abstraction, concrete. You can see in this a negation of the negation, the law of the dialectical materialism explained by Friedrich Engels in Anti-Düring. Returning to the point, we as Marxists, as economists using the Capital written by Marx and Engels, we accept the mathematics. Why? Because we are socialist scientifics. So we have to accept the use of mathematics. The mathematics maybe cannot resolve every problem that we can find in the way, even though the mathematics could solve many of our problems. So we cannot deny the use of mathematics or the use of the mathematics. We accept that it's possible to understand the exploitation within the capitalist system using the mathematics. Who was the first to understand this? Karl Marx. You can see all the text, the Capital, written with arithmetic accounts, with formula and many things like this. Moreover, I could say that it's hard to study the Capital because it has many arithmetic accounts, many formulas, and so on. But dialectically talking, I could say that this becomes easier to study the capitalism. It's impossible that I can speak bad mathematics, seeing and reading within the capital many formula. Even you can find many approaches took from the physics, from the geometry, even analogies took from the chemistry, with the desire that the reader understand the ideas that Marx is presenting in the book. Deny the fact that with math you can understand the capitalist system, and of course the exploitation within this is empiricism, repudiation to the dialectic materialism. If we say that Marxism or scientific socialism is a science, it's because it can collaborate and interact with many other science. For example, math. The empiricism hates to analyze and to think in abstractions and so on. However, we must remember in the book of Marx and Engels called The Holy Family, they talks about how the Descartes disciples were searching for new ideas which explain the society in which we live. So our ideas, the ideas of the scientific socialism, is rooted in the science, in the natural science. Therefore, we cannot misundermine the other science, and we cannot say that from there we cannot understand how the people is exploited. This should be empiricism. In the 90s, Ted Grant wrote a book about science and socialism and dialectical materialism. This book is written by Ted Grant, but before he Friedrich Engels tried to do a book similar to this. The textbook Reason in Revolt is a book edited in the 90s. He tried to teach us dialectical materialism through the science modern, through the mathematics, through the modern physics, and so on. Engels, in his times, he tried to do the same, but he couldn't do that. History I have taught you many times before. Unfortunately, the book only finished in manuscripts that were published after the death of Engels. It was the great fault of Eugen Düring. Dialectic of Nature is the manuscripts that would be a book similar to Reason in Revolt, but with the science of that times. Many of these manuscripts are about mathematics, geometry, and so on, and others about physics, mechanics, history of mathematics, physics, mechanics, history of science, and so on. Marx, after to write the third volume and the second volume in particular, he thought that it was possible to foresee slums and crises and so on, and he wanted to learn much about mathematics, in particular differential calculus, and he started to read to Newton and Leibniz, but he didn't understand, or moreover, he found mistakes in the conception of limit by them. He criticized two scientists because he considered that the concept of limit wasn't too good defined, because he thought there was mysticism in the conception of the definition of this new tool. Behind him, there were two mathematicians in the same position, Lagrange and D'Alembert, the two French mathematicians. Even though they couldn't solve the same problem, it was solved by Cauchy and Weierstrass. Marx couldn't study the solution, even though he studied many calculus and his studies were published after his death, and they were called the mathematical manuscript of 1881. But he wasn't the unique who tried to study mathematics with the same tension. The husband of Laura, his daughter, tried to study the same. In this audio, I hope to convince to my audience that it's important to learn mathematics because empiricism hates to study, hates the abstractions, hates to think, and to arise the mind over the sense. The empiricism carries us to the anti-Bayesians and that kind of stupidities against the development of the productive forces, particular against the proletariat. Therefore, the empiricism carries us to the fascism and the far right wing. It wasn't a casualty, the empiricism within the Nazis and their ideas anti-science.